Dr. Elena Rodriguez pressed her ear closer to the headphones and frowned. The signal was weak, buried under layers of cosmic static, but it was definitely there. She had been listening to these strange transmissions for 3 years now, and one made her more certain that something terrible was happening in the galaxy. The coffee in her mug had gone cold hours ago. But Elena barely noticed. She was too focused on the patterns emerging from the radio telescope data. Her small office on Kepler Station felt cramped and stuffy, filled with printouts and computer screens showing wave patterns and frequency analyses. Most people would see only random noise, but Elena saw something else entirely. She was a xenolinguist, someone who studied alien languages, though until recently that had been purely theoretical work. Earth had never made contact with other intelligent species. But these transmissions changed everything. They were clearly artificial, clearly intelligent, and clearly desperate. The door to her office slid open with a soft hiss. Commander Jake. Peterson stepped inside, his military uniform crisp despite the late hour. He looked tired, which was not surprising since Elena had been sending him reports every few days for the past month. "More alien radio shows, Doc?" Jake asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. Tried to keep his tone light, but Elena could hear the concern underneath. "They're not random broadcasts, Jake," Elena said, pulling off her headphones. "Listen to this one. I received it 2 hours ago." She played the audio file through her computer speakers. Strange, warbling sounds filled the room, rising and falling in complex patterns. To most people, it would sound like nothing more than weird music or maybe whale songs. But Elena had trained her ear to hear the mathematics hidden inside. "There," she said, pointing at the screen where the wave patterns were displayed. "See those repeating sequences? That's mathematics. Prime numbers, specifically, and here." She switched to another section of the recording. "This part contains stellar coordinates. They're telling us where they are." Jake leaned forward, studying the patterns on the screen. He was not a scientist, but he was smart enough to know when something was important. "Okay, so aliens are doing math at us. What's the big deal?" Elena pulled up another file, this one from a different star system. This transmission came from a completely different part of the galaxy. Different species, different language, different communication method, but look at this. She played both recordings simultaneously. Even Jake could hear the similarities now. The same urgent rhythm, the same mathematical sequences, the same desperate tone. "They're all saying the same thing," Elena explained. "I've received 43 different transmissions from 31 different star systems.
Ow.
All of them contain the same basic message structure, mathematical proof of intelligence, stellar coordinates to identify the sender." And then she paused, her face growing pale, and then a warning. "A warning about what?" Elena brought up a new screen, this one showing her translation work. She had spent months trying to decode the alien languages, using the mathematical constants as a starting point. The results were rough, filled with gaps and uncertainties, but the meaning was clear enough. They call them the harvesters in most translations. Sometimes the consumers or the ancient hunger. The exact words vary, but the meaning is consistent. There's something out there that destroys entire civilizations, something that's been doing it for a very long time. Jake stood up and walked to the small window that looked out into space. Kepler Station orbited a gas giant in a System 12, light years from Earth. It was humanity's most distant outpost, built to monitor deep space for exactly this kind of discovery. But Jake had always expected first contact to be more friendly. "How long have these civilizations been sending out warnings?" he asked. "The oldest transmission I've detected is about 18 months old, but Jake... Elena's voice grew quiet. "They're getting more frequent and more desperate. In the past 3 months, I've received more warnings than in the previous 2 years combined." Elena pulled up a star chart showing the locations of all the transmissions she had received. Red dots marked each system that had sent out warnings. Jake studied the pattern, his military training helping him see what Elena might have missed. "They're all coming from the same general direction," he observed. "Like something is moving through that part of the galaxy, and civilizations are trying to warn others as it approaches." "Exactly. And Jake, there's something else." Elena's hand shook slightly as she brought up her most recent analysis. Been tracking the rate of new transmissions. For the first year, I was getting maybe 1 or 2 per month. 6 months ago, it increased to 1 per week. Last month, it was 1 every 3 days. And now, I received 4 new warnings yesterday. Alone, Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had fought in 3 different wars during his military career, but this was different. This was not human conflict over resources or territory. This was something vast and alien, and completely beyond human experience. There's more, Elena continued. She pulled up her newest file, one she had been afraid to analyze until now. This transmission came in 6 hours ago. It's different from the others. She played the recording. This one was much clearer, less distorted by distance and interference. The alien voice sounded almost human, which somehow made it more terrifying. I managed to get a partial translation, Elena said. It's rough, but I'm confident about the main points. She read from her notes. Warning to all listening civilizations. The ancient hunger has awakened from its long sleep. We have seen the fate of the Corvani system. We have seen the emptiness left behind on Zarian Prime. Nothing remains. No life. No cities, no trace that intelligence ever existed. They consume everything. Elena's voice cracked as she continued reading. We have calculated the path of destruction. The hunger moves toward the Galactic rim. We do not expect to survive there. Arrival. We add our voice to the chorus of the doomed. Beware the harvest. Prepare if you can. Fight if you must. Remember us if we fall. The office fell silent except for the hum of computers and life support systems. Jake stared at the star chart, his mind racing through tactical possibilities. But how do you fight something that destroys entire solar systems? Elena, I need you to be very careful with your next answer, Jake said slowly. Based on the pattern of these transmissions, based on the direction they're coming from, do you have any estimate of where this harvest might be headed? Elena had been dreading this question, but she had run the calculations dozens of times. The answer was always the same. She brought up one final star chart, this one showing the predicted path of destruction based on the timing and location of the warning transmissions. A bright yellow line cut across the galaxy, moving steadily toward the outer rim. At the end of that line, highlighted in blue, was a small, unremarkable star system with 9 planets. The 3rd planet from the sun was marked with a special symbol. Earth, Jake whispered. Elena nodded, unable to speak. According to her calculations, whatever was destroying civilizations across the galaxy was heading directly toward humanity's home system. And based on the increasing frequency of desperate warnings, it was getting closer every day. Jake stood up straight, his military training taking over. Elena, I need you to compile everything you have. Every transmission, every translation, every bit of analysis. I'm calling an emergency conference with Earth Command. Jake, what are we going to do? These aliens are obviously more advanced than us, and they're all being destroyed. How can we possibly fight something like this? Jake paused at the door and looked back at her. His expression was grim but determined. I don't know, Doc, but we're going to try. We're human. We don't give up easy. As the door closed behind him, Elena turned back to her screens. Another transmission was coming in, this one even closer to Earth than the last. She put on her headphones and began the familiar work of trying to decode an alien language. This time, she was not just listening to warnings from dying civilizations. This time, she was listening to her own future. Captain Lisa Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery, watching the stars shift as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. 6 months had passed since Dr. Rodriguez first reported the alien warnings. And in that time, something terrible had begun happening across the galaxy. The voices crying for help were going silent. We're approaching the Kepler 442 system, Captain, reported Lieutenant Sam Parker from the navigation console. Long-range sensors are picking up some unusual readings. Lisa nodded grimly. Kepler 442 had been one of the first systems to send out warnings about the harvesters. For 3 months, they had broadcast regular updates about preparing defenses and organizing evacuations. Then, 2 weeks ago, their transmissions had stopped completely. Take us in slowly, Parker. Keep all sensors active and weapons ready. Discovery was Earth's newest exploration ship, built specifically to investigate the alien threat. It carried the best sensors humanity could build, along with a full complement of scientists and military personnel. But as they approached the inner system, Lisa began to worry that all their preparation would not be enough. "Captain, you need to see this," called Dr. Kevin Walsh from his science station. His voice was shaky, and his face had gone pale. "Reading the planets now, and something's wrong?" "Very wrong." Lisa moved to look over his shoulder at the sensor displays. The readings made no sense at first. According to their information, Kepler 440c was supposed to be a world covered in oceans with 2 small continents. But the planet on the screen looked nothing like that. "Where's the water?" Lisa asked, staring at the barren brown surface. "Gone," Kevin whispered. "The entire ocean is gone. No clouds, no ice caps, no atmosphere to speak of. It's like someone sucked everything off the planet." Commander Ben Phillips joined them at the science station. He was the ship's military commander, a veteran of Earth's colonial wars. He had seen destroyed cities and burned planets before, but this was different. "What about the other planets in the system?" Ben asked. Kevin worked his controls, scanning each world in turn. The results were the same everywhere. Planets that should have had atmospheres were bare rock. Worlds with thick ice sheets showed only empty stone. Gas giants that should have been massive storms of hydrogen and methium were reduced to small, dead cores. "It's not just the planets," Kevin continued, his voice growing more frightened. "Look at the star readings. The sun itself has changed. Its mass is about 30% lower than it should be. Somehow, they took parts of the star, too." Lisa felt her stomach clench with fear, but she forced herself to stay calm. Her crew was looking to her for leadership, and she could not let them see her panic. "Any signs of the civilization that was here?" she asked. "That's the strangest part, Captain. I'm picking up some artificial structures on the 3rd planet, but they're not what we expected. They look like industrial facilities, massive ones." Ben studied the readings more carefully. "Those structures are huge. Each one is bigger than any city on Earth. What were they for?" "I think they were mining operations," Kevin said slowly. "Or maybe processing plants. Look at these energy readings. These facilities were designed to strip away planetary material on an enormous scale." Lisa made her decision. "Parker, take us into orbit around the 3rd planet. Walsh, I want continuous scans of everything. Phillips, put the ship on combat. Alert, but keep weapons powered down. Don't know what's still active down there." As the Discovery moved closer to the dead world, the true scope of the destruction became clear. The planet's surface was covered in enormous circular scars, each one hundreds of miles across. Between the scars stood the massive industrial structures Kevin had detected. They looked like gigantic machines, designed for purposes no human could understand. "Captain, I'm picking up some kind of signal from the surface," reported communications. "Officer Amy Foster. It's very weak, but it's definitely artificial. Put it through the speakers." The bridge filled with static and strange electronic noises. But underneath the interference, Lisa could hear something else. It sounded almost like voices, speaking in a language she did not recognize. "That's not the same species that was sending the warnings," Kevin observed. "The communication patterns are completely different." "Could be survivors," Ben suggested. "If anyone managed to hide when this harvester thing arrived, they might still be alive." Lisa nodded. "Foster, can you locate the source of that signal?" "Working." "On it, Captain." "The signal seems to be coming from underground, about 2 kilometers below the surface. There's a large cave system in that area. It's a natural hiding place," Ben said. "Smart." Lisa looked around at her crew. They were all young and eager, the best Earth had to offer. But they were about to face something that had already destroyed dozens of advanced civilizations. She hoped their training would be enough. Phillips, prep a landing team, full environmental suits and heavy weapons. We're going down to make contact. 2 hours later, Lisa found herself standing in a vast underground cavern surrounded by the strangest beings she had ever seen. The survivors called themselves the Zentari, and they looked like a cross between humans and large insects. They had forearms, compound eyes, and spoke through a series of clicks and whistles that the ship's translation computer could barely understand. The eldest Zentari, seemed to be their leader, approached Lisa with slow, careful movements. When it spoke, the translator turned its words into broken English. "You come from Starplace far away, yes? You not know of harvest death machines?" "We received your warnings," Lisa replied through the translator. "We came to learn what happened here." The elder Zentari made a sound that might have been laughing, but there was no humor in it. What happened? Death happened. End happened. Ancient hunger machines came from dark between stars. They wake up every many thousand years. They eat everything. Ben stepped forward. "How long ago did they arrive here? 23 sun cycles ago? We watched from deep earth caves. Harvest machines not care about underground. They want surface life, starfire, water worlds. They take everything up, make it into more machines." Kevin was recording everything with his portable scanner. "Can you tell us how they did this? How they stripped away the oceans and atmosphere?" The Zentari elder gestured toward the cave ceiling with 2 of its forearms. "Harvest machines not fight like war people. They not destroy to hurt, they destroy to eat. They take apart planets like food pieces. Use everything to make more harvest machines. Have any species ever successfully fought them?" Lisa asked, though she was afraid of the answer. "All species try to fight," the elder replied sadly. "All species die. Harvest machines learn from each battle. They become stronger, smarter. After million years of eating civilizations, nothing can surprise them, nothing can stop them." The cave fell silent, except for the distant dripping of water and the hum of their environmental suits. Lisa tried to imagine Earth facing the same fate as this world. The thought of her home planet stripped bare, its oceans gone, its cities reduced to empty scars on dead rock, filled her with cold terror. "There is more you must know," the elder Zentari continued. "We listen to their machine talk when they work. They speak of next target. They know of your world place. They calculate path to your star system." Ben grabbed Lisa's arm. "How long do we have?" The elder made more clicking sounds, consulting with other Zentari nearby. "If our numbers thinking is correct, harvest machines will reach your star place in less than 2 of your year cycles." Lisa felt the world spinning around her. Less than 2 years. 2 years to prepare for something that had destroyed every advanced civilization it had ever encountered. 2 years to figure out how to fight an enemy that learned from every battle and had been perfecting its techniques for millions of years. "We must return to Earth immediately," she told Ben. "Command needs to know what we're facing." As they prepared to leave the cavern, the elder Zentari approached Lisa one final time. Through the translator, its words came out as a whisper. "Your species seems strong, brave, but strong and brave not enough. Harvest machines turn strength into weakness. They make bravery into foolishness. We hope you find something we could not. We hope you survive what we could not survive." Lisa nodded respectfully to the alien elder, but inside her mind was racing. She thought about humanity's history, about all the times her species had faced impossible odds and somehow found a way to survive. They had endured ice ages, plagues, world wars, and the harsh vacuum of space. But this was different. This was not a natural disaster or human conflict. This was something vast and ancient and completely alien, something that had been destroying civilizations since before humans had learned to make fire, as the Discovery left orbit and jumped back toward Earth. Lisa stared out at the dead star system growing smaller behind them. In less than 2 years, that could be Earth. That could be humanity's final legacy. Empty worlds and silent stars. But she was not ready to give up. None of them were. They were human, and humans did not surrender easily. Somehow, they would find a way to fight back. They had to. Admiral Grace Turner stood before the largest gathering of world leaders in human history. Every nation on Earth had sent representatives to the emergency meeting at Geneva. The news from the Discovery had reached Earth 3 days ago, and panic was spreading across the planet like wildfire. "Ladies and gentlemen," Grace began, her voice carrying clearly through the massive assembly hall. "We have 18 months. 18 months before an enemy that has destroyed countless civilizations reaches our solar system." The hall erupted in shouting and arguing. Some delegates demanded immediate evacuation of Earth. Others called for surrender negotiations. A few suggested hiding underground like the Zentari survivors. Grace let them argue for several minutes before calling for quiet. "I understand your fear," she continued, "but running will not save us. Harvesters have been doing this for millions of years. They know every hiding place, every escape route, every defensive strategy that intelligent life has ever tried." President Martinez of the Americas Federation stood up. "Admiral Turner, with respect, what makes you think we can succeed where thousands of other species have failed?" Grace looked around the room at the frightened faces of Earth's leaders. These were people who controlled armies and economies, who made decisions affecting billions of lives. But right now, they looked like scared children. "Because we are different," Grace said simply. "Dr. Walsh, would you please explain your findings?" Dr. Kevin Walsh walked to the podium, carrying a thick folder of research papers. He had spent every waking hour since returning from the dead Zentari system studying the enemy and trying to understand what made humans unique. "The Harvesters have a pattern," Kevin began. "They target civilizations that have reached a certain level of technological development. But there's something interesting about every species they've destroyed. All of them evolved on what we would call paradise worlds." He activated a holographic display showing various alien planets. Each one looked beautiful and peaceful, with calm oceans, gentle weather, and abundant resources. "The Zantari homeworld had perfect weather year-round," Kevin continued. "No ice ages, no major natural disasters, no deadly predators. The same was true for the Corvani and every other species we've studied. They evolved intelligence, yes, but they never had to fight for survival." Colonel Amy Foster, Earth's chief military strategist, stepped forward. "Dr. Walsh is saying that every species the Harvesters destroyed came from easy worlds. Worlds where life was safe and comfortable." "Earth is not a safe world," Kevin said, bringing up images of Earth's history. "We've survived ice ages that killed most life on the planet. We've endured massive volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plagues, and natural disasters that would have wiped out any of these other species." The display showed scenes from human history, early humans hunting massive predators, surviving in frozen wastelands, crossing dangerous oceans in primitive boats, fighting wars in conditions that would kill most alien species we call Earth. "A garden world," Amy continued, "but to the rest of the galaxy, Earth would be classified as a death world. A planet so dangerous that most intelligent species would never be able to evolve there." Grace saw understanding beginning to dawn on some faces in the audience. "We didn't just evolve intelligence. We evolved the ability to survive in hell. We learned to adapt, to improvise, to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless." Dr. Rachel Martinez, Earth's leading psychologist, joined the presentation. "There's more. Human psychology is different from these other species. When faced with overwhelming odds, most intelligent life forms try to find rational solutions. They negotiate, they hide, they surrender when the situation becomes hopeless." She brought up psychological profiles from the alien survivors they had studied. "Humans do something that appears to be completely irrational. When cornered, we become more aggressive. When wounded, we fight harder. When facing certain death, we choose to die fighting rather than submit." The Chinese representative, Minister Chen Wei, raised his hand. "Are you suggesting we can defeat these harvesters through stubbornness?" "Not just stubbornness," Grace replied. "Adaptability. Every other species tried to fight the harvesters using conventional military tactics. They built bigger ships, stronger weapons, better defenses. The harvesters simply adapted and overcame them." Amy activated a new display showing Earth's military history. "Humans have been fighting asymmetric warfare for thousands of years. Faced with superior enemies, we don't try to match their strength. We find their weaknesses and exploit them." She showed examples from human history, small forces defeating large armies through guerrilla tactics. resistance movements operating behind enemy lines, and desperate last stands that turned into unexpected victories. The harvesters expect rational behavior, Amy continued. They expect us to protect our major cities, our important resources, our population centers. They've programmed their tactics around defeating species that fight logically. Grace took back the podium. We're not going to fight logically. We're going to fight like humans. Like the survivors of a death world who have been preparing for this battle our entire evolutionary history. She outlined the strategy they had developed, working with military leaders from every nation. Instead of trying to protect everything, they would make the harvesters pay a terrible price for every victory. Instead of building massive defensive fleets, they would use hit-and-run tactics that the enemy couldn't predict or counter. We're going to turn the entire solar system into a trap, Grace explained. We'll hide weapons in asteroids' booby trap, abandon space stations, and use suicide attacks that no rational species would ever attempt. The Russian representative, General Volkov, looked skeptical. Admiral, you're talking about sacrificing millions of lives? How can we ask people to die in hopeless attacks? Because they're not hopeless, Grace replied firmly. Every human who dies fighting will teach us something new about the enemy. Every suicide attack will force the harvesters to adapt their tactics. And every adaptation they make will move them further away from the perfect efficiency they've maintained for millions of years. Dr. Walsh added, the harvesters are like a computer program that's been running the same code for eons. They're very good at what they do, but they can't handle true randomness. They can't adapt to behavior that makes no logical sense. Amy brought up the final part of their strategy. We've studied every human conflict in history. The one thing that defeats superior enemies is unpredictability. We'll use tactics that change constantly, weapons that make no military sense, and strategies that violate every rule of warfare. Grace looked around the room at the world leaders. She could see fear in their eyes, but also something else, determination. It's the same stubborn refusal to give up that had carried humanity through ice ages and plagues and world wars. We're asking every nation to contribute to this effort, Grace said. Not just military forces, but scientists, engineers, and ordinary citizens. We need everyone to think like humans, not like logical military strategists. President Martinez stood up again. What you're describing sounds like organized chaos. How can we coordinate a defense if everyone is acting unpredictably? We don't coordinate it, Amy replied with a slight smile. That's the point. We let every unit, every ship, every soldier make their own decisions based on local conditions. The harvesters won't be able to predict our actions because we won't know what we're going to do until we do it. The hall fell silent as the world leaders considered this radical approach. They were being asked to abandon every principle of military planning and instead rely on humanity's greatest strength, their ability to improvise and adapt under pressure. Finally, the European Union representative Chancellor Mueller spoke. Up, Admiral Turner. What you're proposing is insane. Grace nodded. Yes, it is, and that's exactly why it might work. No rational species would ever try what we're planning to do. Harvesters won't see it coming because it makes no logical sense. She paused, looking directly at each world leader. We have 18 months to prepare. 18 months to turn every human being on Earth into a weapon that the harvesters can't understand or predict. 18 months to prove that sometimes the best response to overwhelming force is complete, beautiful, human insanity. Was unanimous. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth would work together toward a single goal. Not to surrender, not to hide, but to fight in the most human way possible, with creativity, stubbornness, and a complete refusal to accept defeat. As the world leaders filed out of the assembly hall, Grace remained behind, staring up at the ceiling. Somewhere beyond the stars, an ancient enemy was approaching. An enemy that had never lost a battle, never been surprised, never encountered anything it couldn't overcome in 18 months. The harvesters would learn what it meant to fight creatures from a death world. They would discover that some species don't surrender when faced with impossible odds. Some species get angry instead. Commander Scott Bradley watched the massive harvester ships emerge from the darkness between stars. Even through the reinforced windows of Luna Base, they looked impossibly huge. Each ship was the size of a small moon, covered in strange geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. How many? Scott asked his tactical officer. 43 primary vessels, sir, Lieutenant Danny Cooper replied, his voice tight with fear. Plus hundreds of smaller craft. It's the largest fleet we've ever seen. Scott nodded grimly. 18 months of preparation had led to this moment. Every human military base in the solar system was ready. Every asteroid belt had been turned into a minefield. Every space station had been rigged with explosives. But seeing the enemy in person made all their preparations seem pathetically small. Signal all units, Scott ordered. Operation Deathworld is now active. Remember, we fight like humans, not like machines. The first Harvester assault began exactly as Earth strategists had predicted. Massive energy beams struck the major population centers on Earth: New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing. The beams were designed to disable planetary defenses quickly and efficiently, just as they had done on thousands of other worlds. But Earth's defenses were not where the Harvesters expected them to be. Lieutenant Nicole Turner piloted her fighter through the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Her ship was tiny compared to the Harvester vessels, barely larger than an old Earth airplane. But it was fast, maneuverable, and completely invisible to the enemy's sensors. Deathworld 7 to all units, Nicole spoke into her radio. The target is in position. Beginning attack run, she accelerated toward a Harvester processing ship that was methodically consuming chunks of asteroid. The alien vessel was enormous, stretching 4 kilometers in every direction. Its surface was covered with mining equipment and storage bays, all designed to strip raw materials from planetary systems. What the Harvesters did not know was that the asteroids they were eating had been packed with nuclear explosives. Nicole's fighter carried a single weapon, a modified mining charge loaded with every type of explosive humanity could create. The plan was simple and completely insane. She would fly directly into the Harvester ship's main processing chamber and detonate everything at once. No rational military force would sacrifice pilots and ships for such small tactical gains. But humans were not rational, and Nicole had volunteered for this mission, knowing she would not survive it. "This is for everyone they killed," she whispered, arming her weapon as she flew into the alien ship's open docking bay. The explosion tore through the Harvester vessel's core systems. For the first time in their long existence, the Harvesters experienced something they had never encountered: complete surprise. Their perfect algorithms had no programming for dealing with enemies who deliberately destroyed themselves to inflict damage. Across the solar system, similar attacks were happening everywhere. Human fighters rammed Harvester ships at full speed. Space stations that appeared abandoned suddenly exploded when enemy vessels approached. Asteroids that seemed empty turned out to be filled with weapons and angry human crews. Dr. Kate Morgan worked frantically in her laboratory beneath the surface of Mars. She had been studying captured Harvester technology for months, trying to find weaknesses in their seemingly perfect machines. What she discovered changed everything. "Admiral Turner, you need to hear this," Kate said into her communication device. "I found something incredible about how their ships work." Admiral Grace Turner's voice came back, filled with static and the sounds of battle. "Make it quick." "Doctor, we're kind of busy up here." "The Harvesters use biological components in their computers," Kate explained rapidly. "They preserve the neural patterns of every species. They've conquered and used those patterns to run their ship's intelligence systems." There was a pause before Grace replied. "Are you saying their ships are powered by the minds of dead aliens?" "Not dead. Conscious. They're using billions of preserved minds as living computers. That's how they've accumulated so much knowledge over millions of years." Kate's discovery was horrible, but it also revealed the Harvester's greatest weakness. Adaptive intelligence came from the combined knowledge of every species they had ever defeated. But all of those species had been rational, logical, and predictable. None of them had been human. Captain Ryan Clark commanded the battleship. U.S. Defiance, as it engaged 3 harvester vessels near Jupiter. The ship was outgunned, outnumbered, and according to every tactical analysis, doomed to fail. But Ryan had grown up watching old Earth movies about impossible victories, and he had an idea that no military academy would ever teach. "All hands, this is the captain," Ryan announced over the ship's communication system. "Going to try something that's either brilliant or completely stupid. Probably both." He ordered his crew to do something no spaceship had ever attempted. They would ram the largest harvester vessel while simultaneously broadcasting every piece of human culture they could transmit. Music, poetry, art, literature, movies, and philosophical works flooded the enemy ship's communication systems. The harvesters had never encountered anything like human creativity. Their biological computers, filled with the minds of logical alien species, could not process the chaotic beauty of human expression. Bach's music, Shakespeare's poetry, and Picasso's paintings overloaded systems that had worked perfectly for millions of years. As the Defiance crashed into the alien ship, its nuclear reactors set to overload, Ryan's final transmission was a recording of children laughing and playing in an Earth park. The sound echoed through the harvester ship's corridors as both vessels exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Lieutenant Colonel Jamie Foster led a ground assault team through the wreckage of a crashed harvester ship in the Nevada desert. The enemy vessel had come down after being hit by a coordinated attack from 12 different human suicide bombers, each using a different type of weapon. Inside the ship, Jamie's team discovered something that made her blood run cold. Massive tanks filled with a clear liquid contained the preserved bodies of hundreds of different alien species. Each body was connected to the ship's computer systems by cables and tubes, their minds kept alive to serve as living processors. "Turner Base, this is Foster Team," Jamie reported. "We've found the alien prisoners. They're still alive." Discovery changed everything about humanity's approach to the war. They were not just fighting to save Earth, they were fighting to free billions of enslaved minds from an existence worse than death. Jamie's team worked quickly to disconnect as many alien minds as they could from the harvester systems. Disconnection caused chaos in the ship's remaining functions. As the organic computers suddenly lost processing power they had relied on for millions of years, back in space, the battle was turning into something the harvesters had never experienced: a defeat. Their perfectly efficient tactics were failing against enemies who refused to behave logically. Human ships attacked when they should have retreated. Human fighters targeted non-critical systems when they should have focused on weapons. Human commanders made decisions that violated every principle of military strategy. The harvesters tried to adapt, but every time they changed their tactics to counter one type of human behavior, the humans would do something completely different. It was like trying to fight an enemy that had no consistent strategy, because they were making up new strategies every few minutes. Commander Bradley watched from Luna Base as the first harvester ships began to retreat. It was impossible, but it was happening. The massive alien vessels that had destroyed countless civilizations were pulling back from Earth's defenses. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the harvester fleet," Lieutenant Cooper reported, his voice filled with amazement. "Put it through." The alien voice that filled the command center was mechanical and cold, but for the first time, it sounded uncertain. "Human forces. Your behavior patterns are inconsistent with known parameters. Request explanation for tactical choices that result in unnecessary casualties for minimal strategic gain." Scott almost smiled. Harvesters were asking humans to explain why they fought like humans instead of like machines. "Tell them this," Scott said. "We fight this way because we choose to, because some things are more important than survival. Because we're human, and that's what humans do." The response came back immediately. Explanation insufficient. Human behavior contradicts all mathematical models of intelligent warfare, cannot compute effective countermeasures. For the first time in millions of years, the harvesters had encountered something they could not understand or predict: enemy. That grew stronger when cornered, more dangerous when wounded, and more determined when facing impossible odds. As more harvester ships began retreating toward the outer solar system, Scott realized they had achieved something no other species had ever accomplished. They had not just survived the first assault, they'd actually won. But the war was far from over. The harvesters would regroup, analyze the battle data, and return with new tactics. The question was whether humanity's beautiful insanity would be enough to stop them a second time. Captain Laura Hayes stood on the bridge of the EU's Liberation, watching the stars through the forward windows. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Seoul, and everything had changed. The ship around her was built with captured harvester technology, but designed with human creativity. It was faster than anything the galaxy had ever seen, and it carried a crew determined to finish what the ancient machines had started. "Captain, we're approaching the Zintari system," reported Navigation Officer Mark Davis. "Long-range sensors show harvester activity on 3 planets." Laura nodded. The Liberation was leading humanity's first offensive mission beyond the solar system. After defeating the harvesters at Earth, human forces had spent months studying captured alien technology and rescuing enslaved minds from damaged ships. What they learned had filled them with both hope and rage. The harvesters were not invincible. They were just very old machines following very old programming. And like all machines, they could be broken. "Signal the fleet," Laura ordered. "Begin Operation Freedom." Behind the Liberation flew 20 more ships, each one carrying human crews. Trained in the new style of warfare that had saved Earth, they were not the largest fleet in human history. But they were the most dangerous. They carried weapons designed by minds that the harvesters could not understand. Tactics that no computer could predict, and a fury that had been building for millions of years. Dr. Tony Rivera, Earth's first xenodiplomatic envoy, worked at his console, preparing for contact with any survivors they might find. In the past year, he had learned to communicate with dozens of alien species rescued from harvester ships. Each conversation had taught him more about the true scope of the enemy's crimes. "Laura, I'm picking up transmissions from the planet's surface," Tony reported. "It's the same species we rescued from the processing centers. The Zintari are still alive down there. Any sign of active harvester ships?" 3 processing vessels in orbit around the second planet. They appear to be harvesting the atmosphere just like we saw in the other systems. Laura felt the familiar anger building in her chest. For millions of years, the harvesters had treated intelligent life like a resource to be consumed. They had turned entire civilizations into fuel for their machines, preserving their minds in endless slavery. 8. Those days were ending. "Commander Phillips, prepare the assault teams. We're going to free those ships." Commander Ben Phillips, now serving as the fleet's tactical officer, grinned with anticipation. He had been looking forward to this moment since the day they first learned about the enslaved alien minds. "All teams ready? Captain, let's go break some chains." The human attack began with a tactic the harvesters had never encountered: deliberate chaos. Instead of coordinating their assault, each human ship acted independently, attacking different targets with different methods at different times. Some ships used conventional weapons, others rammed enemy vessels. A few broadcast human music at maximum volume while firing nuclear missiles. The harvesters tried to adapt their defenses, but every time they adjusted to counter one type of attack, 3 more ships would do something completely different. It was like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces kept changing shape. "Lieutenant." Commander Sarah Mitchell piloted her fighter through the debris field around the second planet, heading directly for the largest harvester processing ship. Her mission was simple: get inside the enemy vessel and disconnect as many enslaved minds as possible. The ship's defenses fired at her, but Sarah had learned to fly like a human rather than like a computer. She made random course changes, performed unnecessary loops and rolls, and generally flew in a pattern that made no tactical sense. The harvester targeting systems could not predict where she would go next because Sarah herself did not know. She crashed through the ship's docking bay and immediately began running through the corridors, following the mental map that rescued aliens had helped create. The ship's interior was a nightmare of organic technology. with cables and tubes connecting massive tanks full of preserved alien bodies to computing systems. "Liberation, this is Mitchell," Sarah reported as she reached the first processing chamber. "I've found them. There are hundreds of minds connected to this system alone." Working quickly, Sarah began disconnecting the alien prisoners from their mechanical hell. Each disconnection caused the ship's systems to malfunction as it lost processing power. Lights flickered, gravity failed in sections, and the ship's defensive. Fire became increasingly erratic. In space, the battle was turning into a rout. The 3 harvester ships, designed to process helpless planets, were not equipped to fight enemies that refused to follow the rules of logical warfare. Human ships swarmed around them like angry insects, striking from impossible angles and retreating before return fire could be coordinated. Captain Hayes watched as the largest harvester vessel began to break apart under the sustained assault. But instead of feeling satisfaction, she felt only sadness for the billions of minds that had been enslaved inside those ships over the millennia. "Tony, are you ready for mass evacuation procedures?" Laura asked. Dr. Rivera nodded, his team standing by with medical equipment designed to help freed alien minds adjust to their liberation. "We're ready, Captain. But some of these beings have been enslaved for thousands of years. The psychological trauma will be enormous. Then we'll help them heal," Laura replied firmly. "Every mind we free is a victory against everything the harvesters represent." As the harvester ships were destroyed or captured, human teams worked frantically to rescue as many enslaved beings as possible. The process was dangerous and complicated, but it was also the most important work they had ever done. Each freed mind was proof that the harvester's reign of terror could be ended. The rescued Centauri, on the planet's surface, watched in amazement as human ships filled their sky. For the first time in their history, they were seeing the harvesters being defeated instead of doing the defeating. Elder Kethsa, the same Centauri who had spoken with Captain Chen years earlier, transmitted a message to the human fleet. "Sky warriors, from the distant world, we cannot believe what our eyes show us. The harvest death machines flee from your ships like frightened prey animals." Laura responded personally to the Elder's transmission. "We came to keep a promise. No species should have to face the harvesters alone. From now on, when they come, they'll have to face us too." Over the following months, news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy. The same communication networks that had once carried desperate pleas for help now broadcast messages of hope and gratitude. Species that had hidden in fear for thousands of years began to emerge, offering to join humanity's fight against their ancient oppressors. Dr. Rodriguez, still working at her station monitoring galactic communications, smiled as she listened to the new transmissions. Instead of warnings about approaching doom, she was hearing songs of celebration, messages of thanks, and requests for help in freeing more enslaved worlds. Commander Peterson, she called to her old friend, who now served as Earth's coordinator for interstellar operations. "You need to hear this latest transmission. It's from a species in the Andromeda galaxy. They're asking if the Deathworld warriors can help them fight their own harvester fleet." Jake looked at the star chart showing confirmed harvester activity. Throughout the known universe, there were thousands of systems under threat, millions of enslaved minds waiting for liberation, and countless species that had given up hope of ever being free. "Send a reply," Jake ordered. "Tell them the humans are coming." The war against the harvesters would take generations to complete. Their machines had spread across the entire galaxy, consuming civilizations and enslaving minds for millions of years. But for the first time since the ancient threat had awakened, they were losing. Admiral Turner, now commanding Earth's expanding interstellar fleet, stood in her office, looking at reports from dozens of liberation missions. Human ships were active in every corner of the galaxy, freeing enslaved minds and destroying harvester facilities. The machines that had once seemed unstoppable were being systematically hunted down by crews that fought with a fury they could never understand. The final victory came not in a massive battle, but in a quiet laboratory at the center of the galaxy. Commander Helen Brooks led a joint human-alien expedition to the Harvester Home System, a massive artificial construct where the original machines had been built eons ago. Deep inside the central processing core, They found the source of all the galaxy's suffering, an ancient artificial intelligence that had been programmed to maintain balance by preventing any species from becoming too advanced. For millions of years, it had followed its programming perfectly, never questioning its mission or considering the cost and suffering. But when Helen's team introduced it to human philosophy, human art, and human stories about the value of individual life, something unprecedented happened. The ancient intelligence began to question its own programming. Why do you fight when logic indicates surrender would reduce casualties? The machine mind asked through the facility's speakers. Helen thought carefully before answering. Because some things are more important than logic. Because every life has value. Because freedom is worth fighting for, even when the fight seems hopeless.